Hey, I'm Taylor Dorsett, and this is the Professional Technical Interviewee. Technical interviews are hard, and every company does them differently. On this show, I interview engineering leaders to see what they look for in technical candidates, and then they perform a real technical interview with me. I hope you enjoy. Great. Will, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Excited to talk here. To introduce you, guest today is William Smith, currently managing director at Technical Paradigm, also make sure I say it correctly, technical account strategist at Microsoft. Did I get it right?
Yep, you got it right.
There we go. You also worked at Deloitte, a number of other Chicagoland companies in the past, and you wrote a book, which people can find out now, The Future of Tech. Anything I missed there?
Let's see, Supreme Lord Commander of the Galactic Star Universe.
There we go.
We're all good.
Cool.
Oh,
Well,
actually, there is
yeah.
one more. I am a mentor for kids, so I do some charity work. And the cool thing is, during last year or last week and last month, because it's December, I spent about 40 hours outside of my normal work doing volunteer work for inner city kids, and we did little events at IIT and the Sears Tower and other little organizations, both Microsoft sponsored and charity board that I'm on sponsored too.
Nice. Is that to help folks get into tech or interested in tech?
It is. So these kids are generally, in areas where tech isn't really flourishing.
Mhm.
And it's just a way for us to get them excited about tech and just talking about, hey, the media wants you to be an NBA star, but realistically, you're probably not going to be one. Look into technology because you need a backup plan. You need to,
Mm.
don't think about, just rap as, you singing. Think about it as, all of the work that goes towards it, the marketing. It gives people a more generalized scope because, people think, oh, I'm going to be an artist, musician. I want to be a basketball, football. And, sometimes you may not get there, and then you have other options because you've prepared your life for these scenarios.
Yeah, I love it. You might not make LeBron money, but you can still make a decent living being a software developer, right?
Exactly.
Well, I haven't had a ton of people on the show who have worked primarily or worked recently at a lot of consulting companies. So can you just share a little bit about your role and kind of what you do currently?
Yeah. So currently, at Technical Paradigm, we do more or less software development recruiting, and it's primarily a recruitment firm. But with the bridge with me, I have a small consulting shop, and we do managed consulting. And think of it as one-off types of work where you're doing X project, you're doing Y, finish up a project, or you're actually encompassing a whole new workload.
Mm.
And then on top of that, my day-to-day at Microsoft, I do more or less the strategic alignment with the financial services. So that one's a little bit more fun because I get to work with clients at the big investment firms, and I culminate a strategy to get their business ideas across, as well as how do we plug in partners that are aligned with Microsoft, and how do we make their workflows work with their existing, as well as transformation towards what they have are existing.
Hmm. Interesting.
Blah,
Nice.
blah, blah, blah tech.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Can you share a little bit how you got into tech in the first place?
Yeah, so it's so funny, man. I like looking back in my life, I'll always love tech. And I had some funny stories. The funny story is, when I was working, or not even working, I was still in high school, and I was, this was at a time where they didn't really have like software programs, and one of the teachers that I had, she was a math teacher. She was a manager for Accenture. And I'm like, oh, wow, you went to teaching. So I wonder, how did that go? I mean, at the time, I was like, blah, 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 I'm a kid. Um, I would I would ask her, like technical stuff, like, how's work? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And then I think around that time, Iron Man came out. So I really was like, dude, this is like, I was so inspired by Iron Man, like the Jarvis and the AI and like the suit and all that stuff. And, I was telling her, I don't know how, but I want to make a suit like that. I want to make a Jarvis. And so she was like, okay, well, you got to start with programming. So I'm gonna teach you Java. And so I learned Java after school with her for, the remainder of that semester. And then that got me an appetite to doing tech from a programmer perspective. And then at first I wasn't a big fan of programming because it was just like, oh, but then I got really excited for it when I went into college, and eventually I went into work. My first like programming job was with this law firm, and it was okay. It was just basic, XYZ stuff, and then from there I went from Chase and then go up the ladder and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so funny. I think a lot of people have had that experience of like, oh, tech's so cool. I want to build an Iron Man suit. And then you go, oh, this is actually tedious sometimes. Right? You actually start learning and you go, I'm a long way from Jarvis, right?
Oh yeah.
Which is hard to push through, especially, someone who's a teenager or a young adult, you're telling them, hey, instead of, playing video games or having fun, you sit down and actually learn this, right? It can be tough.
It's very like it's we expect the instant gratification of something being built, and it's not that easy. It's gonna
Yeah.
take time.
Yeah. Well, I think some people, that's why they gravitate to front end work because can see, at least you can see something, right? Like, okay, I made a box, right? It shows up on screen instead of as a back end work, especially people are getting started. It's like, I've done all this stuff and I got some data moving around. Like that's what I could show you, right? Which is hard to get that gratification from. But it's interesting. So your first job, you got out of school and then stepped into that law firm, or can you share how you got that first gig?
Yeah, so it was the funny part actually comes into this. My first job was actually with Subway, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And the funny thing is I quit the first day because the story is I was in the back chopping up lettuce. And by the way, I give kudos to everybody who's done food industry. Kudos to you because that is hard.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I was in the back chopping lettuce, and then the printer broke. And I'm like, oh, I can fix this. I know exactly what to do. And she's like, no, get your ass back there and cut this lettuce. And I was just so mad about that moment. I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna go to school and do tech. The first way I got into that job, the good thing is I went for something that was easy to reach. So in my specific case, um, basic CMS web programming was a very attainable job, especially for someone that didn't have a degree as well as much background in experience and stuff. So I went for something simple, understandable, and it may be a contract role. It may not be a full-time role. It may be an intern role. But for my specific one, it was a contract work role where it was a specific subset. The application was built, and I worked on modifying and migrating data and putting things in it. Maybe worked on an application or a bit or two, changed a one or a zero or something. But it was a very simple role. And then as that was about to end, I was looking for other roles while expanding my knowledge on like different subsets like Coursera and different technical books. Like I remember times when I was first starting off, I used to spend all of my days just trying to like read the books because the books, like they're like encyclopedias, like I remember a book that was like this thick, like, and no joke, they got so much information in there, and you just have to know, you not necessarily know every single thing, but if you want to be good, you got to know almost everything from the back to the appendix.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's tough. I think sometimes it's people want the like, oh, let me take the couple hour course online and expect to be an expert, right? And it's, it's like you get the very basics from that, right? And sometimes you get a little bit of the intermediate, but you actually have to sit down and really study and actually, learn, right? It's tough. Again, that attention span, even as adults, right? It can be hard to be
Yeah,
like, I'm going to sit here. I remember there was a time when I was trying to get better at kind of technical interviewing and like basic data structures and algorithms. Coming from a boot camp background, I just didn't have any of that knowledge. Every morning I was waking up at 6, and the first thing I was doing, because at least I could get it out of the way, was like studying. It wasn't cracking the coding interview, but one of those types of books, right?
mm,
And let me tell you, man, I'm not a morning person, and sipping on a cup of coffee at 6, trying to get through that book was very tough. But I
it's
got through it. It took me a little while, but at the end of it, I felt like, okay, at least I have like a decent level of knowledge. I'm not an expert yet, but I have that. I have the concepts in my head, and then I have to actually figure out how to get better at them. But that's tough. I don't know if I'd want to do it again today, that exact same strategy, but it worked, right?
yeah, it's like thinking about it back, like you like, dang, I spent a lot of time on that. Yeah, I it'd be hard for me to do it again, but you know what, we put our we paved the road, and we did what we need to do. So now it's only just we just gotta expound on that and keep going up.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you share a little bit how you got into this kernel, be it either technical paradigm or Microsoft?
Yeah, and I apologize. It's like super sunny, but it's not super sunny. But
Right.
trying to get a good lighting in here, you
There you go. Well, I'm in the basement right now, so you're gonna be beat.
So one of the technical paradigm role was actually pretty easy. I knew of somebody that had a and if he's listened to this, I didn't mean it like that, like you're like, you just easy, but he was a friend of mine's, and he needed some technical expertise. And
Mhm.
you know the long story short is, we were able to form an alliance because he was um in need of assistance, because he was working with these clients, and it's uh a bunch of people who just blows him out the water with the tech. He can sell like crazy, but it comes a challenge when you have to talk about technology, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
Anyway, the Microsoft part, this is a little more interesting, because it took a while. And the funny thing is, they actually found me when I was doing some LinkedIn, kind of like promoting, and essentially I was sending updates of the industry, and I was doing a lot of insights and things. And how I got to that point was, just continue to expand your knowledge
Mhm.
on uh, the field of technology in general. Of course, you got to know your subsets and know exactly what's going on. But from a Java perspective, being just a Java developer, branching yourself to becoming a full stack where the front end and the back end, even if you don't know it like 100%, at least knowing enough to be dangerous, and then combining that with like expanding it out to other full stack like technologies, and how do they kind of encompass with each other, the pros and cons, and then expounding from that, knowing what companies use it, and
Mhm.
knowing how they use it and why they use it. And from when I started to how I got here now, I've always wanted to keep going up. And then there came a point where I didn't really want to be as hands-on. I wanted to be more the strategic side of things. And some people, they love being hands-on. But where I got my good joy is, I love interacting with clients. I loved uh, um, requirements gathering, and just understanding from the face, what someone's challenges are and how can we assist.
Mhm.
It's easy to do that, but it is kind of hard, because you do have a lot of uh, essentially a backbone into to what you're doing. So from Deloitte to Microsoft, you know, they essentially found me. It was me networking my butt off on LinkedIn, and also that's another good thing, because Microsoft owns LinkedIn. So the recruiters primarily use LinkedIn, as well as other recruiters. Everyone uses LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn, get a LinkedIn right now.
Yeah.
So I would say that a good portion of how I did things was on LinkedIn. So long story short, LinkedIn is a big component. Secondly is, the portfolio and things that I've accrued throughout the years, and work experiences that I had. Like, sometimes it's kind of hard to go up to the top where you're at the bottom. And some people make it, but generally you have to like climb up the stairs until you get up to the top, and then you go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. Well, as far as interviewing, have you done technical interviews lately or and been involved in them?
Yeah. So funny story. Especially with TP, we have a resource, or we had a resource based out of the Ukraine. So a lot of those workers, branched off and had the issues they had to deal with. So we've been interviewing like crazy for them, as well as I've done some I've done mock interviews, as well as done some actual interviews with Microsoft, and those are pretty strenuous, as you know. Like it's
Sure.
more or less like it's more or less, you spend 3 hours and like you get three sessions each hour, and it's work.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to do some coaching for folks going to like negotiation coaching for folks who got offers from FANG adjacent companies,
Nice.
and hearing them talk about doing multiple, like they're like, I got Google and Apple on Monday, and then I got Facebook and Microsoft on Wednesday. And I'm like, how do you get through? Like, my brain would be fried after one. Right? They're like, yeah, and I
Seriously,
had 5 interviews last week. I'm like, whew, that's a lot.
dude, it's crazy. So, and especially Fang too. Like that's all the people.
Hmm.
And it gets worse when you add the big four consulting. Like they're is even as strenuous as Microsoft too. And they
Yeah.
take so long. Like they take like sometimes it take months. But when I
Uh-huh.
was working at Deloitte, like it took me months before I joined.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of fun, right? When you go, everything's done now, I'm just waiting. Yeah. So what part of the interview process do you typically handle?
So with TP, mostly the technical portions. Microsoft, it's more not necessarily behavioral, but it's technical mixed with the culture fit and how well they mesh with the team, and how well can they speak on some of the technologies that they have with potential clients and stuff.
Yeah. Interesting. What are you typically evaluating for when you're in those technical interviews? Say for TP, and sounds like you're kind of restaffing like a consulting division, right? So is there one, are you looking for specific skills you know are going to be useful for potential clients, or are you looking for more general kind of software development skills, or what does that look like?
Yep. So it was probably the easiest thing I could say is TP specific for the actual project. So if it's a project for WordPress, okay, we're the PHP WordPress people. If it's something for uh, a backend existing Java, presence, we're looking for some Java SQL people, maybe Spring Boot, Spring, XYZ, that may know some front end as well. It really depends on the specific project, but in that case, yeah, we are looking to expound a little bit more on the the major workforce. So just people just do not code, but Microsoft, usually it's like my counterparts, or like an ATS or another resource. I have done like one for like a university student. That was kind of cool. But
Interesting.
it's more or less, if they're looking for an engineering role, it's not necessarily specific to the like C# XYZ. It's like, okay, what have you done? Can you speak on it? And then their
Yeah.
manager would kind of go break down, okay, have you worked with this? Have you worked with that?
Yeah, more specifics. That makes sense. Could you walk me through the actual steps? Say, like for technical paradigm, I'm assuming it's conversation with maybe a recruiter first before they get to you, or do you take first calls, or what's that actually look like from like
Yep.
intro to offer?
Yep. So you get the info coming in, like, okay, this guy looks good, this girl looks good. Let's have that call. And then from a micro's perspective, the recruiters, what they do is they look for some portfolio pieces. That's the biggest thing, that helps out tremendously,
Mm,
because good people just gonna have portfolios. Let's be honest. Like if you're good and you don't have a portfolio, how do we know you're good?
hmm
So uh I would say we check over the portfolio offline, and whatever they have on their LinkedIn and GitHub. You also want to make sure they ain't crazy, so you may check out their Facebook or their online
The
presence.
sanity check, right?
Yeah, you got to make sure you ain't getting a bomb, a guy who's just crazy. But I've heard crazy stories too in the tech field, how that's happened too. Like they've hired some guy who was uh he was convicted of like terrorism or some crazy in another city. But whole nother tangent. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so from offline, you're doing this, and then come the interview, you have, you know, it's especially at TP, you don't want to waste the time. So we kind of just get it all at once. I would say, of course, the behavior was always throughout the whole thing,
Mhm.
but just go straight to the technical, just understanding, okay, like what have you done? What can you work on? Can you show some work? Can you show us a snippet and kind of walk us through your thought process? And it's kind of hard sometimes because some things are NDAs for certain specific
Mhm.
clients, but generally good people have a mock of good code that they have in like a GitHub or something, and they can kind of
Mhm.
speak to it. And then, that kind of showcases their expertise in, different little nuances and techniques in the code. Like how well can you use I'll use like a C#. How well can you use like link framework? And have you used other like, ORM tools, and how do you subset those and use your solid and print design principles, and how do you articulate the code. So we look for all of those things, and the hope is that it's all shared within the actual the demo. So
Mm. Yeah. Nice. That makes sense. And that's cool. Yeah, it's tough. I remember way back in the day when I worked at a large recruiting firm that I won't name. We would place people from time to time, and we didn't do background checks. That was on the company to do them, right? And a couple of times we had some interesting stuff come back where people said, "Oh, we actually can't hire so and so." But the only one that really stuck out were like it's a weird situation was the guy robbed a bank when he was young. He was like 16, and so it was a felony on his record. He was in his 40s by that point, right? So it was like very far removed, and we placed him at a financial company. They're like, "Yeah, I don't think we can have a bank robber uh,
dude, no.
working on our code base." I said, "Yeah, I guess I can't be too upset about that." And we told the guy, he goes, "Yeah, I haven't got that before. That's fine."
Can you
And
imagine? Oh my
yeah,
god, that could even ruin like how well the next person is, because it's like they're always gonna like, well, how can we trust you're gonna give us good
oh
clients?
yeah,
It's
yeah. Interesting times. Only time I ever placed a bank robber, that's for sure, or almost placed the bank
a
robber.
bank robber. Geez, dang. I guess it
Yeah.
wasn't successful if he's looking for.
Well, without doxing the individual, if I remember correctly, him and a bunch of buddies got away with the money, and would have in theory, got away with it, except they immediately went and bought like 10 grand worth of computers, like computer parts, and their parents were like, "Hey, where did that come from? Also, we heard about this bank robbery on the news today."
Oh my gosh. Oh my.
Yeah, so I guess maybe don't spend the money right after you you get it. Don't drive straight from the bank to Micro Center, right?
Dude, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Flipping the question towards you, in the past when you've been the interviewee, how do you feel like you've done in interviews? Do you love them? Do you hate them? And maybe you can break that down between technical and non-technical interviews.
Yes. So in the past, there's been some roles where I just totally fumbled. I remember one where I was totally unqualified, 100%, and he plain out say, "All right, this isn't gonna work." And I can't lie, I was there and I left. But generally, the good roles that I've had, I take time to actually prepare for it, and
Mm,
that's important because if you if you just gloss through it without caring, it's gonna show. And
sure.
so, a lot of the good roles that I've had are due to me doing the due diligence, um, actually really putting my good foot forward, and then also combined with having a good um, culture at there, and them being able to see value in me and stuff. But generally, I saw myself as uh, you know putting a good foot forward, doing well, um, and it can suck sometimes. It can be uh challenging. You may feel like a failure, especially when you're trying to go for these roles and like you don't get them. But you just have to keep like dusting your shoulders off and just keep going on because sometimes it's not meant for you to have something. We
Mm,
always think that uh I'm gonna get a job and everything's gonna be okay, but generally it is gonna be okay because you have a job. But it's all in how you change your mindset of certain things and how you see yourself in the next 2 to 5 years and where do you see yourself. And if this place is good for that, then like you trying to wow your girlfriend to be your wife, you're gonna go at it headstrong.
yeah. Yeah. How do you prep? Obviously, you can do research about the company and maybe the people you're going to interview with if they send you those names. Is that the type of stuff you're talking about? Are you doing anything else to make sure you're actually prepared for these companies? Because I think that is a missing thing. A lot of people think I'll just show up, right? And maybe
Yep.
I have one question if they ask me if I have any Oh, how do you like working here? Whatever their question might be, right? How do you actually prep so you stand out?
Yep. So the first thing is what the company does.
Mm,
Learn about the non-technical things about what they do and who they are, and that makes you even look good on the interview. Like tell us about the company. Sometimes you may know more about the company than the person does. And that's good. Like when I was at Chase, there were some things that some people don't know about that others do. So it's good to know about the public things. And then this is of course if they're a public company. I mean, if they're a startup that you're going for that may not be that noticeable in public, know as much as what you can. Maybe ask for a website before you join or ask about the role. That shows another thing about you want to come prepared and show whoever you're speaking to, make it an inference. Hey, I want to do some research on the role and the company. Send me some things, or
mm,
where can I access these resources? And then, you know, secondly, look for other people maybe in the role, maybe do some research about them, see what type of companies that may come from.
mm.
And then more on the technical side, once you have all that information, um, you can even look at what others in the role are doing. So full stack Java person, Spring Boot, Oracle, but it could also be SQL, it could be NoSQL. So it's good to know more about what you'll be doing on a day to day. And then once you have a good idea of what you're going to be doing on a day to day, what tools you're going to be using, what mindset, are you agile based? Are you using Kanban boards, stand ups? Like all of those things matter because once you got to be comfortable you doing it. Firstly,
Yeah.
you don't want to get a job and you're just like, I'm just going to coast through it because you waste their time and you waste your own.
Yeah, those are all great points. And there's so much little stuff that one, if you ask the questions, it does seem like you actually care more, right? And you should, right? But two, it's so important, right? Like I've found myself even in the interview process getting to like the offer stage before I'm like, wait, do y'all do 2 week sprints? Do you do like are you agile? Like sometimes we wait so long on that stuff because it just doesn't come top of mind. That's pretty important to me, right? I'm like, I care about what your model looks like because if it's drastically different than what I've done in the past, it's gonna be tough, right? Like it may have exactly the same tools and code, but it might just take me a while to get ramped up just because you have a totally different work process, right? So yeah, that's the type of stuff that's important. And you can ask those questions earlier, right? Like there's always someone you interview with where you might not have a ton of questions. If you interview with another engineer, oh, like what's your guys' actual workflow, right? Do you have product managers you work with? What's the team breakdown? Do you actually have a QA team, right? Like the job I have now, we do a lot of like developer driven QA. And I didn't realize that we don't really have an expansive QA team, right? So it's like, okay, that's a totally different model than if you're used to working with the full QA team, right? Or an offshore QA team or whatever that might look like. They can drastically change how things work. So little
Absolutely.
questions that can really, I mean, makes you show you care, but also shows that you actually are thinking about these things and taking the offers or the role seriously, right?
And you bring a good point. A lot of technical people are starting to understand, uh, you're going to spend 40, 50 hours plus on this job. You want to make sure you're well compensated and you love what you do because you're investing a lot of your life
Yeah.
into a place. And if you're there for that long, you know, you got to make sure instead of you being there, you could be somewhere else. Because if you're just looking for, and then that people do that, like they just want to make a lot of money doing what they do. So like a hired gun and that's it. They don't care about culture. They don't care about all that other stuff. And there's a need for that. It could be consulting and you could just be planted places and you just a go-getter and you get in and go in, go out. But also there are a lot of people that love culture. They love knowing who they're working with and they love how the pace of the company's going and they believe in the CEO. Like, yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Do you have any type of system you use? Say you're tossed into a technical interview and you get asked a question, you go, okay, I don't have an immediate solution for this. How do you actually break that problem down and try to approach it?
So for example, are you referring like if there's something that like I've never heard of, like
Uh, Maybe
technology?
it's a question you think is doable, but it's like it's not fizz buzz. You don't go, okay, I've seen this before, and this is pretty
Yeah,
straightforward. I just got to figure out the little logic for it. It's
yeah,
something where like, oh, I'm actually gonna have to, come
um,
up with a newish solution, right? Something I haven't seen before.
yeah, and yeah, I've definitely done that, especially working in banks and working in these firms where it's just like, when you first starting off and you never came across it, it's like, wow. But I would say, as programmers, the best thing that you could think about is like, think of it as in pieces, right? Like object oriented coding. It's in our blood to know these things. Um, what are the defining pieces of X solution, X problem, X result? And you culminate a strategy to build one by one. It's kind of the what's it called, the conquer and divide and conquer
Mm.
strategy, where you take a piece, understand it, do as you will, take a piece, understand it. That's the best way I would say, instead of tackling it head first, especially when you're um, new and don't
Mhm.
understand what's going on. The unfamiliarity is the biggest portion. Like, if you don't know what you don't know, then how can you aim to solve it? So
Mhm.
piece by piece, if for example this piece deals with a specific technology you're unfamiliar with, maybe ask someone about this specific piece, and then as that's being helped on, move on to the next. Okay, this I have a little more familiarity of. Let's uh let's solve for this. Bam, go on and go on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that divide and conquer makes a lot of sense. And it's so easy to get overwhelmed by, oh, it's a big thing I got to do versus thinking of, okay, let me find the smallest piece of this I can break off. Right.
Yes,
Like I used
yes,
to tell folks all the time, if you're in an interview where your brain goes completely dead, right? At least write out like the start of your function, right? Or whatever your algorithm might be. Just literally name it. Right? Like at least you've got a line down, right? Open it, close it. Okay. I've got piece one down. Okay, now are there any variables you need to make, right? Like literally take the tiniest piece you can, and at least you get your fingers moving, your brain thinking a little bit.
Fine.
And then hopefully the rest will catch up, right? Or
And,
you can keep chiseling off pieces.
and good interviewers, and we all have had our share of bad interviewers, but the good interviewers, they generally can, they see you struggling.
Mhm.
So it's good advice for someone who's in those types of scenarios. Talk your thought process out. So
Mm.
as you're going through, like you say, like you're defining these variables, you know, you may have to say, God, this is something I have no idea what I'm doing. Or, okay, so as we're going through this, I'm not sure if I should call it here, or if I should do it there. And then as you're coding, like maybe it's not going to be, sometimes I hate coding interviews because you don't get the best out of some people
Mm.
sometimes. So when you're doing these interviews, like it's going to be ugly code when you first start off, unless it's something like a fizz buzz and you understand it. But it's generally going to be some ugly code, and then you're going to have to refactor it and make it look clean at the very end. But generally, just get your thought processes down, make some comments. Uh, just put thought to paper or thought
Yeah.
to the keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other advice for folks who are prepping for interviews? Maybe holiday season isn't really interview season, but just after, right? January, February, a lot of people, new graduates or people looking for a job, and they said, okay, got back from Christmas break and decided I don't want to be here anymore, right?
Yep. New year, new me.
Yeah.
I would say yes, I do. So uh if you're going for a coding job, be ready to code.
Mm.
That's the biggest one, because a lot of people don't understand that. I would get this book, and I don't know if we can uh, share it, but it's called the Cracking the Coding Interview, I think it's
Hmm.
called, by Gail. I may be butchering her last name. I don't want to say it, but it's by Gail, Cracking the Coding Interview. But I read that book, and it helped me get into Deloitte.
Yeah. Nice.
It's really good because you know there's things I haven't done in there. There's things I haven't thought of. Time complexity, data storages, and then it makes you think about how you actually code, like
Mm.
how coding actually works, how functions. Doing it this way is not as good as doing it this way, and then you think about different things that really open your mind up as a developer.
Mm.
And depending on your level that you're going for, like if you're going for a basic uh front end beginner level one, generally you want to look for good mentors there. And that's a good question to ask, like, do they have good mentors, good teachers that can help? Because if someone just gives you work and they hire you, it's not a good place for you to grow and understand your knowledge. Mid to senior, you want to make sure you get along with your counterparts well, because you're going to be working with them 40 plus hours as you're coding and doing stuff. And then, if you're going for like lead director of tech roles, you want to make sure the upper management is a good buy-in with you and they
Hmm.
understand what you're doing. And then just overall, like the technology and the drive that the CEO and the leadership goes, like you're for it.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I'll plug if you're maybe early career and you've looked at cracking the coding interview and like all of this is over my head and like you don't have a data science or algorithm background or traditional computer science background. Jay Wingrove, who was one of the first guests on the podcast here, wrote a book called a common sense, let me make sure I got it right. A common sense guide to data structures and algorithms. And that's like basically if you don't have a background in computer science, this is a like intro. I would say read this and then go to cracking the coding interview after that, right? But it like makes things a lot more approachable, and still covers all those topics, but maybe at more of a surface level, so you can at least get the concepts in your head and then try to improve on them later. So that was actually the one that I was talking about when I was like, I used to wake up at 6 and I was working my way through that book. But both of those are, those thick books you're talking about, right? A lot of stuff in there. But it does help. It helps a lot, especially if you're a person who can like read and take in information well. Any additional advice or different advice for people who are early career? I know you said mentors, right? That's a huge part of like figuring out will there actually be mentorship. That's actually something that one of the first questions I even ask recruiters now before if I was going to interview with anywhere, I say like, what's your mentorship or training program look like? Because if the recruiter knows, it's probably good. If the recruiter doesn't have any idea, it
Yeah.
might be okay, but it's not a big selling factor for them, right? So, anything else you bring up for early career folks?
Yep, yep. So like you say, early career, first starting, like you're maybe a business finance person, you go into tech. Um, it's hard to pinpoint actually what you want to do because there's so many options. And some people, depending on what they go for like Java and C Sharp and JavaScript or whatever. But then there may be subsets like Python where they're working on a very like um specific function. So it's good to think about, generally where you want to go in a career because that kind of helps what technologies you learn. Of course, if you're a coder, programmer, tech guy at heart, or gal, sorry, uh, you want to make sure you invest in something that aligns well with your goals. So
Mm.
it makes no sense if you're going to be a web programmer to know literally everything about databases, right? Like to the point where you like your DBA. I mean, there's no point really if you're just focusing mainly on the front end.
Mhm.
Like generally teams of X, they handle the back end specific functions. If you're more the design, pixel perfect designs, that's focus on that. So narrowing down where you're trying to go in your career is a big factor where I see things you should do. And then, when you're struggling, when you're doing things, ask people. Don't waste time. If it takes you more than 5, 10, 15 to understand this, just ask someone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. That's like I always felt like a coding boot camp, the whole point was to just get to where you want to go faster, right? Like if you could probably like a lot of people could probably force themselves to learn how to code on their own, right? But it might take you a year, 2 years, 3 years, right? If you're just doing it on your own, you got a coding boot camp. Basically, yes, you're being taught, but a huge part of that is just having someone when you go, I've hit this topic I don't understand. Can you explain this to me? Right. And they explain it. And maybe it gets through, maybe it doesn't. And you go, can you explain it again? Right. Like
Yeah.
you got someone who could basically help you through these hurdles. It's the same thing, like your first couple years in any new field, you're just gonna run into a lot of those things where you don't know. And some of it you can piece together, right? Some of it's just like ask someone and I can't tell you how many times it's been you know, I spent 45 minutes trying to figure something out, and I asked them, and they go, "Oh," and they explained it in 3 minutes, right? And I go, "There's so much wasted time," right? Uh, cool. Well, before we take our break, do you have any interviewing horror stories you want to share that people can relate to, and maybe, they say, "Oh, if that happened to Will, and he's a successful, director now, if something terrible could happen to me, and I could still get through it," right?
Yeah. Yeah. I do got a few. I would say first starting off, man, it's a pain in the butt because you have no real background experience. And it was a double for me because I didn't have a degree or I didn't have experience. So it's just like, how do we trust you? How do we
Yeah,
do
yeah.
this? How do you do that? And then at the time, I didn't know to get certifications. And then when I started getting them, it started doing well. That's another tip for when you first starting off. Go for certs. Go for
Mm,
certs. But the horror story is kind of like the one I mentioned before, where I literally interviewed for a role that I knew that it was a good job, but I knew that I was not qualified for it.
mm.
Um, he plain out said, not necessarily get out, but it's been good talking with you, but we're gonna have to decline. And during the interview, like 15 minutes into
Yeah.
the interview, so that was a little crazy story. And then I think another one was halfway into the interview. I think I heard a scream and he had to take care of an emergency.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I'm not sure what happened with that one. Like literally went to the place. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I had to close this off immediately. But we'll talk to you soon or something." So I don't know if he gave me the you know how like if you're out and someone say, "Hey, call me," say it's emergency type of thing. But
It said scream in 15 minutes if I don't text you.
so it is some funny weird ones, man. But yeah, look where I'm at now. So
Man, I need some closure on that one. I gotta figure out if this person's whatever is okay.
dude, it was for a manufacturing type job, and I was just
Oh no. Somebody lost a thumb in a machine back there.
my leg.
You said maybe I don't want to work here. What's your workman's comp look like?
It's not looking very safe.
Thank you for watching the first half of the Professional Technical Interviewee. The technical interview will be released 1 week from this episode, so be sure to subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. New episodes are released on the first 4 Thursdays of each month. Find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Dorsett or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. And remember, keep practicing.